We're doing the Easter eggs prediction for season 7, episode 6 of Marvel's Agents of Shield. So be aware, spoiler, not cut off. So the episode's title was called "Adapt or Die," which is obviously referring to the Chromicons adapting, but could possibly or the only other explanation is Coulson dying at the end, or Mac's parents being revealed to be dead. And be turned into Chromicons. Those are the only explanation of what that actual episode was tied to. So yeah, but you have this opening title card, and it's similar to season 5 title cards with like the weird sci-fi looking letters, but more specifically season 5 episode 19, because this episode was dealing with the Chromicons putting the lighthouse on lockdown, and you have Rick Stoner's hologram pop up a couple times, and so it reminded me of that episode specifically because of it being on a lockdown, and that hologram that popped up in that episode. So yeah, but you have Nathaniel, and the story with Nathaniel, Daisy, and Sousa, where we get information about what's so different about this timeline than it was in the original one that we came from, and he apparently isn't so religious like his family was, with trying to get Hive back to Earth, because he actually mentions to them that, or calls Hive the space octopus. So yeah, but he also name drops the Inhumans, which I don't think we've heard that name in a while. I don't think they actually mentioned or name dropped Inhumans in season 6. But I know they mentioned in season 5, but season 6, I can't think of a time that they actually mentioned the name Inhumans. So it's nice that they referenced it here. But you have uh, Nathaniel's plan is to take Sky's powers, similar to how uh, Whitehall took Jiaying's powers away in 1989. But you have Nathaniel actually use Whitehall's catchphrase, "Discovery requires experimentation," but he mentions to Daisy, saying, "What makes you so or show me what makes you so special?" And I could be completely wrong, but doesn't Whitehall say that to Jiaying, saying, "What makes you so special?" just before operating on her, but then also says to Daisy, Whitehall saying to Daisy in season 2, episode 10, before he was going to operate on her, saying, hoping you're so special as your mother is. So it reminded me of those two instances. So yeah, but you meet this new agent, and with under the lockdown at the lighthouse, and her name is Agent King, and I don't know if this is supposed to be her or not, but there is an Agent King in the comics named Veronica King, and she was introduced in Irredeemable Ant-Man number 1, which came out in 2006. Which, as far as I understand, is that she was dating the current Ant-Man at the time, which was the third one called O'Grady. But I don't know if that's supposed to be her or not, because there's no Ant-Man in this episode, obviously. But the only reference we get from her, other than that, or the name, is that apparently the Project Insight actually was her first mission coming out of the academy. So she's very low on like the level scale, which I'm assuming obviously level 1. So yeah, but you have Mac and Yo-Yo trying to rescue his parents, and his first like interaction with one another You have Mac hugging his mother and whatnot, calling Yo-Yo his girlfriend and whatnot. But uh, you had Yo-Yo mention to almost slip up to the parents saying that this is Agent Mac Mackenzie, because Mac Mackenzie uh, Mackenzie is the the father and their last name, so she had to change it up and call it Macklemore, which I'm assuming it's a reference to the rapper Macklemore. I don't know any other famous ones, so I'm assuming that is supposed to be a reference to him. But it's a nice way to avoid saying Mackenzie. So yeah, but you have May and Coulson been captured still, and you have basically them hashing out their feelings, even though May has no feelings at the time. But you have Coulson reference again that he's died and come back, and I didn't ask for that, which it was a big part of season 5, which he didn't want to come back. He didn't want another life extension. So having him back as an LMD, he's not too happy about it still. I'm not sure if that's going to change by the end of the season, but he's May basically says that she uh, May is fed up about mourning his death, and she's not going to do it again. So she's trying to like basically distance herself from Coulson, but this is obviously reference to all the times she's mourned his death, and I believe that's at least 3 times, as as from my memory, is from obviously the Avengers death, then the death that would happen in season 4 with the whole Dark Force dimension, where everyone thought Coulson, Fitz, and Robbie had died. So she was mourning his death there, and then obviously the death at the end of the season 5 finale. So she's just had enough of mourning Coulson's death, because he always comes back. So, and it comes back later on in this episode. So you have back with Daisy and Sousa, where Nathaniel actually is finished operating on her for right now, and he mentions to the goons, don't kill the golden goose, and it's obviously a reference to Daisy being the golden goose in this scenario, but obviously a reference to Jack and the Beanstalk about him stealing the golden goose. So yeah, but once Daisy gets back in the room with Sousa, she's muttering under her breath, saying, "Jiaying, it happened before," and it's obviously referring to when Whitehall butchered her, but that happened in 1989 instead of. So it did happen before for Daisy, but it hasn't happened yet in this timeline. So yeah, it's kind of cool that they're playing with that scenario and saying that, even though it hasn't happened yet in this timeline. But to keep Daisy alive, Sousa's telling her the story about how he lost his leg, and I don't believe they've ever actually mentioned it at all in the Agent Carter series. So it's nice that they're actually explaining how it happened in this show. But he mentions this guy named Mike Stevens. I don't know if they mentioned it ever in Agent Carter, but I looked him up to see if he has any connection at all to Marvel, and there is a Mike Stevens who is a letterer. I'm assuming a letterer is one of those like text bubbles, so all the weird like fonts and whatnot is what a letterer is. But if that's wrong, just comment down below, correct it for me. But yeah, so Mike Stevens could be a reference to Mike Stevens, the letterer, because that's the only explanation I could find if that is who they're trying to reference. So yeah, but you have Mac and his parents and Yo-Yo trying to escape, trying to get to the Quinjet, and his mother gives Mac a nickname called Huggies, and Yo-Yo calls back to when she first called him Turtle Man, which happened in season 3, episode 21, I believe. I believe that's the first time that Yo-Yo called Mac Turtle Man, so it's a reference to that. But then uh, his Mac's father chimes in saying that, or is what's called his mother mentions, is it because he slowly crept into your heart or something like that? But uh, Mac's father chimes in saying, "Slow and steady wins the race," which is obviously referring to the tortoise and the hare storyline or story, where the tortoise went so slow and won the race and be uh, going against the hare that was going so fast. So yeah, but you finally get more information. We get information about what's going on with Simmons and why she's forgetting a lot of things, and it's because she has this implant in her neck that inhibits her memories and changes it up so that if the Chromicons actually did take her, she would not know where Fitz is. But we actually find out that Simmons actually gave this implant a name, and it's Diana. And if you had watched her live streams, Elizabeth actually has been doing live streams for every episode, so you can watch it right now. But during this live stream for this episode, she actually mentions that the reason her implant is actually named Diana is actually because a couple episodes ago, back in the black and white episode, behind the scenes, Elizabeth's boyfriend actually proposed to her, so now they're engaged. And at some point after that, she started calling her engagement ring Diana. So Marissa Tantron actually got in contact with Elizabeth, saying that, oh, this implant is going to be called Diana. So it's a nice little behind the scenes Easter egg. So yeah, but some people are thinking that this chip, the name Diana is going to be the name of Fitzsimmons' daughter, which I don't think that would be the case, because you would think Deke would know his mother's name if that was the case. So I don't think that actually is going to be the name of Fitzsimmons' daughter, even if Fitzsimmons' daughter is even going to be born at this timeline, because they're dealing with the multiverse and whatnot. So yeah, and I'll talk about that later on, because you have this little short conversation with Sybil and Coulson, and he references that I haven't feared death in a long time. It's kind of my superpower, which is obviously a callback to earlier on in this episode where Coulson saying that I've died, come back, and may not not mourning his death anymore because she's had enough of it. So yeah, but you have these goodbyes with Rick Stoner, because I'm assuming now that we're left the timeline 1970s, we're not going to see him anymore. But you have May reference saying that she's basically his superior, saying that I'm level 7, and I thought she was level 8. I could be completely wrong, but I believe in episode 7 of season 1 they mentioned that she was level 8, so I'm assuming it's just that she didn't want to brag how actually higher up she is. But it could be also a callback to how this whole series started, of Coulson saying welcome to level 7, because this is the final season, so it might be just a callback to that. But you have May actually give Rick Stoner the idea of the hydrogen wave crisis, because since the Chromicons actually messed with the timeline, it's kind of off of where everything is taking place and whatnot. So instead of the wave crisis happening in 1972, which was actually given in season 5, episode 11, it's now happening in 1976. So it's kind of off, but it still corrected itself. So when they do go back in their original present day, the timeline won't be too different than when they left. But it's nice that they're wrapping that storyline up. So even though we don't know exactly what originally happened in 1972 for Rick Stoner to have that uh, idea of the hydrogen wave crisis. So yeah, but you have everyone back at the Zephyr, and you have this like little like scene with Simmons looking over the now in coma Daisy kind of, and it reminded me of how the shot of Simmons looking over Daisy. It reminded me of season 1, episode 13, when after Daisy got shot by Quinn. Uh, it just reminded me of that. But you have the end credit scene with Deke going to go after Mac to see how he is because he had to kill his parents, and he says to Simmons that I can relate to this, where he has had in his timeline he did lose his parents, so he can relate to Mac in a sense, even though it's two different scenarios. But so yeah, before predictions, I just wanted to mention something, and people are saying that this the Agents of Shield time travel is different than the one that they dealt with in Endgame, which it could be, but to me it doesn't feel like it at all. Because ever since season 5, they've been dealing with the multiverse, and in Endgame they dealt with the multiverse because they've changed a lot of stuff in the past that didn't affect the future. But here you have Sybil's conversation with uh, Sybil's conversation with the Chromicon, and also later on with Coulson and whatnot, saying that as one branch dies, another bears fruit. I read the time streams and the many trees that have grown to be. So she sees different scenarios, different timelines, and multiverse and whatnot, and she's just trying to navigate her own timeline to try to uh, like uh, stop Shield from existing, and the whole hoping that Chronica 2 would come back to life and whatnot, so they can have Chronica 3 and Chronica 2. So it's still a a different timeline, or it is still dealing with the multiverse and whatnot. Especially considering this is technically the third timeline we're in, because the first timeline was from season 1 to season 5 before they obviously changed the timeline, and that's why Deke's still around, because his timeline still exists just in the multiverse. And then in season 6, during season 6 until the finale, obviously, but then whenever Fitz and Simmons figured out time travel, they had to come back and save the team, because in their timeline, the team originally died because the Chromicons attacked the temple that they were in, and then obviously they're in another timeline now, and that's why Mac's still around, because obviously killing his parents, and obviously, or meaning they're already alive, but why none of his memories have changed is because this is another new timeline that this original Mac is not from, because once the Chromicons stayed behind and messed with the timeline and kept Malik alive, this is a new timeline that they're in. So this is the third timeline, I could be wrong, but that they're currently dealing with. So yeah, it still feels like they're dealing with the same time travel aspects as Endgame is. So I could be completely wrong. Just comment down below and explain more if there is some sort of differences. But yeah, so the only prediction I have is that the Chromicons want them to be divided and overwhelm them. So I'm assuming since they jumped further in time than unexpectedly at the end of the episode, leaving Mac and Deke behind, I'm assuming that they're going to try to do that again, and like with other teammates, and try to divide them, so it's harder for them to actually like help the it would be harder for the team to actually come up with a plan and actually defeat the Chromicons in doing what they need to do. So yeah, I'm assuming that's what they're gonna do is divide them in different time periods. So yeah, comment down below if I missed any Easter eggs or references. See ya.